And so if we base our performance off of other people rather than listening to what's true to our values and our integrity, it's always the mark is always moving. It's always changing because I'm not approving of myself, basically.
So welcome everybody to another Awakening Your Health Potential episode. And today we have a very juicy conversation with Kristian Stephan Martin, who's a relationship, sex and self-expression coach. Now, Kristian and I met each other about 3 years ago on the International Book Writers Retreat with Dave Thompson. And I was heavily pregnant at that time, and very much in my feminine, very much. And Kristian was one of my coaches, my book coaches. So that's how we met. And recently I've been wanting to find a male to talk about this topic around like the divine feminine, the divine masculine, what the difference is between kind of these terms are thrown around a lot. And I know that you talk about this on Facebook and stuff as well. And the difference between kind of the immature masculine and the divine masculine and the pattern of what I'm like very obviously seeing in the world and with men generally through COVID. I feel like COVID's been this really interesting thing that has squashed time from what I can see. It's like whatever was going to happen, but it's kind of like and pushed people kind of into the direction that they were already going to go. So anyway, I'm so looking forward to this conversation, Kristian. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome. I even forgot that you were pregnant during the book writers retreat.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, heavily pregnant?
Yeah, when was it? Do you remember what month it was?
I think it was like August, September, October.
Oh, maybe not heavily. She was due in December but came in January.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah. Wow. That's pretty late.
Yeah, so it would have been 6 months plus.
Yeah, got it. Cool. Well, I'm excited to be here for this.
Yeah, me too. And I'm really glad. And so when I was trying to find someone, I suddenly remembered this TED talk that you did, and I knew it was something around this, and I hadn't listened to it for ages. So I think that might actually be. I revisited it today because it's been ages since I listened to it. But it's called Reconnecting to the Inner Feminine. But the start is just classic.
Yeah.
And what's the start? You can introduce your TED talk.
The start. Well, I mean, if you want a literal recap, yes. The start is me standing on stage. I open my arms and say, "Welcome to the Penis Society."
Yes.
And then I explain what that is.
Well, it's certainly an attention grabber.
Yeah.
The symbolic meaning of the energy, the masculine energy. So I'm going to hand it over to you to kind of go into, what those kind of terms are that people hear a lot and what's the significance of them. And so do you want to start with that kind of penis symbol and the masculine and then go from there?
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, as it relates to this conversation, which is I know is about kind of the balance of the feminine and masculine and moving from, both immature masculine and feminine to mature in both those forms. The masculine for me, yes, symbolized by the penis, is it's penetrative. I always struggle to say that word, but it's like it's outward focused, like going out into the world.
It's to make an impact, to penetrate, to...
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, exactly. To make an impact. And yeah, like I really feel our society is founded on very masculine, well, perhaps not founded on, but today we find it to be a very hyper masculine place. And so for me, talking about the 5 Ps is pace, profit, productivity, performance, and progression. All these words that start with P, and like obviously penis as well. And it's kind of what we value in our Western society. We value this, like, well, how fast can you do it? How much money can you make? Last quarter we came out with this, this product. How can we make something which is a little bit new, or like, the next iPhone, progression, always trying to make something new and different. Performance, which is encapsulating with all of those things. And then productivity, which is kind of like, well, how much can we squeeze? Like, how people are obsessed with productivity. How can I do more work in a shorter amount of time? And those things, those values are not inherently bad, but it's when they are out of balance, which is a problem. Yeah. And so, like, if we ignore the 5 Ps for a second and speak more in masculine and feminine, first of all, we all have masculine, feminine. To me, it's not a gender thing in my books. It's a framework. It's just a language. So masculine, goal-oriented, structure, task. I really like to say goal versus soul. So the masculine is, how can I achieve that goal? What do I need? And the feminine is just all listening to, like, soul and connection and going inwards and what's here for me right now in this moment, what's coming through me, what's in my heart. And that's not to, like, confuse the masculine in all of us as not having soul or heart by any means. But it's just I think it's just a real nice way to language the two, to draw comparison so we can understand and go from there.
Yeah. What about, we could use, like, and I have used this in a few chats, so apologies if I'm repeating myself to people that are listening, but, like, in terms of, like, leaders, Donald Trump, masculine, push, not much heart. From what we see of someone like Jacinta Ardern, like, very much more in her feminine, but she's still doing so, like, quite a nice balance.
Yeah.
I've just thought of another P, the provider. I don't need to do any emotional kind of connection with my children. I don't need to, my job is to provide, and then I sit back and relax, and that's my job done. Do you find that?
Yeah, that's interesting. As an FYI, I've just muted myself a couple of times because I live in an apartment and there's something happening out there. So I hope you can't hear that.
Okay, no, I can't.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah, and I do find in my work with men, I work both with men and women. Yeah, that's strong. That's really strong. And it is very old paradigm. And it's not to say that that's bad. Yeah.
No.
Most things, like, generally everything is happening with a, like, logic or purpose or reason. Like, we think it makes sense. And if you look at the history and the evolution of just humankind, that makes sense. Men being more athletic, basically, generally, than women. And if we're talking about hunting for food, well, they're, better equipped if you're talking about athletes. So a lot of the men that I work with, when they're in their 40s and 50s, they have realized that. They're like, wow, yeah, like, I took on the provider role, and it's really hard for them to get out of that.
Have you found in COVID people are defaulting to that? Like, times of stress, like, we default to our kind of our easy options, our not so conscious kind of things. I have noticed this massively, like, the kind of emotional disconnection.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't noticed that in my one-on-one work, but I've noticed collectively just the themes that are coming up for I just think that are floating around and that are there, but they're unspoken.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really agree with you. Like I have a saying that crisis is revealing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah, like crisis reveals where people are at. And it, I can't think of anything that is more central to the conversation around the year that's been than uh, death, fear of death, um, fear of not being approved of, fear of going broke, and fear of losing freedom.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I think about it, this is, I think, potentially a little off topic to the theme that you wanted to talk about today. But yeah, when I think about it, I can't pinpoint anything that is more accurate than those things that has people do the things they do. Well, why are you wearing a mask? Well, I'm afraid that I'll die if I don't, or I'll kill someone else. Okay. Why are you wearing a mask? Well, I am afraid that I will lose friends. They'll judge me. And that's a survival thing as well. That's back in our brain because the reptilian part of us, the primal part of us, knows we need people to help us to live in tribe.
The survival.
Exactly. Then it's like, okay, well, why are you wearing a mask? Well, I'm not worried about people dying. I'm not worried about people disapproving, but I just don't want to fine. I don't want to lose money. And then I think a flip of that actually is I feel like that's kind of one side. And then the other side is, well, I don't want to lose my freedom. Or I'm going to, rebel against this because I want my freedom. So I'm not going to wear a mask. And like, it might sound silly, but I actually think when you really look at the whole conversation around, because the mask thing has been controversial in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and let's just clarify for viewers, you're in Melbourne.
Yeah.
So, in Sydney, we haven't had any compulsory anything. So it's quite a different story. So, yeah, I mean, it's, not to get into the debate about whether scientifically it's relevant or not relevant, why people are choosing to or not wanting to.
Yeah.
So, that it is interesting because literally if it's compulsory, you walk outside and you can lose your freedom.
Yeah.
If you don't have it on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Like I'm not really interested in debating, because I feel like anything can be proved, if you're looking for that thing to be proved. But what I do find fascinating is the psychology that's there for us right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so you guys have had it like in terms of that freedom thing even more so. But along with that, it's like the lack of freedom, but the insecurity of not knowing, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing how long this is going to last for, not knowing if I can go overseas and see my family, not knowing if I'm going to be able to travel freely after this, not knowing if I even really want to go overseas again, like it's all the kind of not knowings as well. Yeah. And then I was going to say something else around that I've noticed. But yeah, it's that when people go into the survivor mode and what you said about what did you say? Something's revealing?
Crisis is revealing.
Crisis is revealing because it's like, again, you can kind of get a really good idea about the foundation of, and this is not in a judgmental way, but just the foundation of someone's being or psyche and how they operate, like I found that really fascinating, thinking, like I thought this person this is how they present in the world, but then the crisis happens.
Yes.
And they're no longer able to hold that space or that more evolved or that more conscious part of themselves. And they just default into really old patterns through like family upbringings and how I was brought up. And that's just how my kind of foundation, that foundation kind of thing is, which I found that really interesting as well.
Yeah. And I remember the reason why I even mentioned that in the first place is that it showed me what we fear is what can be weaponized against us.
Ah, right, yeah.
You imagine, because all those things like death, like fear of disapproval, losing money, and freedom, all of those, like people are largely making decisions based on what they fear and what they don't want to experience or what they don't want to lose. Yeah. So like you can see, well, the majority of people have decided to wear a mask for, they've made that decision from whatever reason. But if you imagine for a moment that someone, like, everyone lost the fear or no longer feared death, losing money, like all those things, you wouldn't be able to use the punishing tactics against those people.
Yeah.
It's the government, right? It's like, if the government thinks they're doing the right thing, whether or not that's accurate, who knows? But they think they're doing the right thing, so therefore they put penalties in place.
Yeah.
But someone like can't be controlled if they don't fear the thing.
Yeah, totally. And I talked about this with another on another podcast about how the media influences our stress, and how the way that to get people moving in Australia was to get us into a fear place.
Yeah.
Because, like, as Australians, and it's not a criticism, again, it's just an observation. It's like, as Australians, we're pretty laid back. If we didn't had any idea what was happening overseas, because that all kind of happened before it happened in Australia, we had no idea. And the government's like, oh yeah, there's a pandemic on, but you guys are all going to be okay. We want you to kind of be vigilant. We want you to wear a mask, but generally things are going to be all right. Are people going to comply? No. But we have the evidence of things happening overseas. And then it's like the fear of, we're going to lose thousands, our hospital systems are going to be overrun, you have to do this, you have to do this. And people get pulled into line, and it works.
Yeah.
And that's why they've done it like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Mm. So let's go back to kind of that feminine, masculine, actually. And you probably have some more to say going backwards, which you can jump around whenever you want. One of the most mentioned thing that after the book writers retreat that I did with you, so it was you and Dave Thompson and Run Wild.
Yes.
So shout out to them. But I came back from that going, when I was going, it was amazing, blah, 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 blah. And one of the most amazing things was I was totally supported and looked after by 3 young men.
Mm.
And it was like, Annie and I were the only girls, and Dane Thomas was there too. And we were just totally supported. We were fed. We were asked if we were okay. We were asked if we needed any help. It was like, that was one of the most beautiful things for me as that experience. I could totally relax and focus on writing because I didn't have to worry about anything else, because you had all of the kind of masculine stuff. It was all done. Didn't have to make any decisions. And then that kind of emotional support was there from the 3 of you. It was really amazing to be part of. And the 3 of you are just so beautifully balanced with that masculine, feminine energy. So that was really awesome for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just really nice to revisit that and hear that from you, because for me personally, that was something which was exciting to me. I'm like getting to take care of, these people, but also knowing, especially like women, especially mothers, like usually they do so many things. They often plan the things, like, you got to be here, you got school, you got sport, you got music, but then also, like, I'm gonna make the lunches, I'm gonna, be the emotional person to like hold and stuff. And yeah, just my recognition of that, I was like, this is gonna be, or we all knew it, we were like, this is gonna be a special experience, especially for yourself and Annie, that like you literally, all you have to do is just focus on this creative process of the book, and just we've got you.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess that is like my most obvious experience of, you know, being with the three of you with that really nice balance.
Yeah.
And I think also, you know, like we've got 5 kids in our house. I don't know if you know that, but we've had 5 kids in our house. So I don't feel that in my practical everyday world. I don't feel that connected to my feminine at the moment, because it's all like do, totally decision fatigue, you know. And so I'm always trying to set up routines so I don't have to decide that just happens, take that sort of stress off. But when you're busy and life is busy, it's like it's really hard to get into like that kind of real flow state because of the having to do, in terms of from my woman perspective.
Sure.
Yeah. And then I guess the opposite to that is, you know, the men are also in everything's busy and they're providing and doing at home as well. And so they are also in that state. So then that emotional connection often starts to not be so strong. And I'm definitely not speaking from any personal experience whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have I have some thoughts on that, but do you have a question that you want to ask off the back of that?
No, go for your thoughts.
Yeah, so go for your thoughts. I love that. So, you know, the first 2 things that pop to my mind there is like the inner relationship that occurs, and then how that affects the outer relationship. Because it's a very one-dimensional experience when you're only operating in a very operational process, functioning, do, plan, kids, things, work, timelines. When that's one part of us. Yeah. And it's kind of like having, you know, 7 different beautiful cheeses on a platter and you only eat one of them, you know. It's like it's very limited. And then if you and I are both eating the one cheese and we're just looking at the 6 others, or we've somehow forgotten about them, that's all we've got to talk about. Yeah, like, oh, how good is this one cheese, Sara? It's like, well, that's going to get old very quickly.
Yeah, totally.
Yes. And I've got no fucking desire to eat one cheese for the rest of my life. So when we open to all of us, and whether you want to call that feminine and masculine, you want to call that yin and yang, you want to call that fire and water, sun and moon, day and night. Like we can use so many different frameworks to just show opposition. Yin and yang is, I think, a great one, because people are like, oh, feminine, masculine, it's too hard to get out of man and woman.
Yeah.
It's just, whatever you want to call it, it's just the fullness of us. And I guess, like, in a way, you know, there's this, I don't know where this comes from. I think it comes from a couple of studies in particular. People often like to throw out this thing of, oh, the human brain only uses like 10% of its capacity. And I know for a while in personal development world, there was this thing of like, what would happen if you could use even just 10 more percent? Like, here, do this meditation. But like, if we use that, if we pretend for a moment that concept is true, it's kind of like that, but on just a being level. Yeah, like it's.
Yeah.
I work in an embodied sense. Yeah, like I do coaching and stuff, but to me, my work is energetic, emotional, and shamanic. And the way that I talk to my clients and on Facebook is like this idea of true nature. This thing which is just us, and it encompasses our human true nature, like our genius, the way we see the world, the way we just naturally gravitate. Like, you've got kids, right? And you would see all of them. They just do things differently. They just have. That's just them, you know. It's like, you know, And our true nature is that, and it's the thing that's greater than us. Yeah, like it's the thing that's greater than us, channeled through us. So there's that divinity level, then there's the human level of our personality. And so I see my role in my work is like, if we're a hose, yeah, like we've got the hose, we've got the garden, and then we've got the water source. Yeah, like ideally you turn the tap on, which is our life force or our true nature, and the water just flows through the hose and it waters the garden, and we have a beautiful, flourishing, pretty healthy garden. But it's like, if you have a really hard knot in that hose, no matter how hard you turn the tap on, that water's not getting through. Yeah. And so the garden suffers for that. It wilters away. It gets dry. It's no longer pretty.
And that's our impact on the world and each other, right?
Right.
Like that's, like
100%. And there's both functional and just beauty elements to that, because like functionally we can grow freaking food, yeah, which is nourishing. Aesthetically, flowers are pretty. And they're life-giving. You put flowers in the middle of the dining table, all of a sudden there's a new life-giving element to it, which is, some people might not have the words for that, but they just notice, oh, those flowers, I feel so nice, right? So when we have our, like when we are in emotional knots, yeah, when we're in energetic and emotional knots, when we fear things, yeah, like link this back to COVID. I don't really want to, but if we talk about fear, like fear of going broke, or fear of like failure, fear of being a bad parent, fear of what is mum and dad going to think, even though I'm a 45-year-old grown adult, those are emotional knots. Anything we don't want to feel, anything we haven't faced is, in fact, in my opinion, an energetic and emotional knot, and it's stopping our true nature from flowing through. And now you think about one knot in the hose. Well, most people have far more than one knot in their hose. Yeah, like most people have 5, 10, 20 from childhood, whatever. Yeah. It's like there's no way that their life force, their true nature, God, source, the universe, or whatever, is going to be able to flow through them to maximum capability. And just to finish this off, two things. One, I believe whatever we embody, we create more of. So if we're dead on the inside, we only create more deadness. Even it can look, and it doesn't have to look like that. But yeah, but like you can create a business from a few different places. But to be really basic, you can create a business from a place of love. Oh, I love this thing. I'm really passionate about, this thing in particular, women's health, or, sensuality or sexuality or relationships. And I want to help and serve people. I want to make good money and do great things for the earth. Yeah. And people. That's one way, love. Or you can create it from fear. Yeah. Like, well, I don't want to go broke, and I don't want to look like a failure. And if I don't get or if I don't have a good job, if I don't go and do law, my parents aren't going to approve me, who I am, right? Just got tongue-tied for a second. And until you learn that you're creating from fear and from wounding, you will continue to do that. And so, yeah, maybe you're doing medicine, maybe you're doing law, but your underlying experience is, well, I've got to keep doing this, and it's an exhausting one because you're outsourcing yourself. So that's one.
And can I just add to that? Yeah. It's depleting. It's like eating the one cheese.
Exactly. It's depleting, and it's not nourishing for the soul. And then I forgot the other thing that I was going to close off. Oh yeah, the other thing, right? Like I said, to remedy this, turning the tap on harder doesn't work. Yeah? Like if there's a knot in the hose, turning the tap on harder actually kind of makes it worse. Yeah, the hose is going to swell up and burst much more quickly.
Mm.
So it's actually turn the tap off, undo the energetic emotional knot, then turn the tap back on. And now, lo and behold, the water just flows. Yeah, like there's no extra effort. It just does what it does, because that is its true nature, is that when you turn the tap on, the water flows through and you've got your nice garden. So the way I work with people and the way that I'm really viewing the world is, so many people are in these knots, and all they have to do is undo those knots. Yeah. And then, like, they don't have to, now they don't have to force, they don't have to effort. Yeah, it's not that life is peachy and we live in the Garden of Eden forever and ever, but it's just a way different way of creating it. It is flow. Yeah, you come back to the feminine and the masculine. The masculine creates by going out and doing. The feminine often creates by radiating and pulling inwards. And so when we have the both of them, it's kind of like this, this nice cycle, this nice ebb and flow, and we're in balance now. But I just see far too many people forcing, raping, taking, competing, because they haven't learned how to self-source.
Totally.
There was a lot in that.
Yeah, there was a lot in that. There was something I was going to say earlier, but I'm just sitting with that for a sec. There's a couple of things that I just want to talk to you about regarding that. So the other way that, the kind of feminine, masculine, tell me if this kind of makes sense with the way you think as well. It's like the masculine is the head. It's like the dirt. And the feminine is more the heart. So, like there's loads of different kind of meditations out there, and it's like you've got to go in, you can do the kind of head stuff, and then you kind of sit back and let it go. Well, how do I feel about this? And you kind of just bring it into your body. How do I feel about this? Where do I feel about this? Breathe through it. Get out in nature. I'm doing some work with a guy that in a shaman. He doesn't like to call himself that specifically, in nature at the moment. And it is phenomenal. Just like some of the experiences I've had just recently are like mind blowing. So I have to kind of, because like I said before, I'm very much in my masculine.
Yeah.
In my doing at home, and I don't particularly like it, but I find it hard not to in that role.
Yes.
So I have to deliberately take myself outside of that. And when I take myself outside of that, I feel like I come into myself, my actual whole self. It's like that, the 1 cheese versus the 7 cheese, like this is how we, Jesus.
Jesus, Sarah.
I haven't thought of it that way before. And then the other thing there's a couple more things I wanted to just talk to you about in that, but that hose analogy is also really great, because it's like who we are and the way we're being and doing things in the world is like, that's what we're putting into the world. So if we want the world to change, if we want the world to be a better place, if we want that, then we have to do that work. We can't just go, well, this isn't in our heads, this isn't right, this is what needs to be done. It can't happen from here. It has to be like that balance. Okay, yes, okay, we don't like this, but how do we feel? What do we feel like the right thing? Like that whole, how do we feel it, but then what do we feel we should do about it, or connect with people, or breathe, or I listened to this podcast recently, which totally blew me away. It was with Brene Brown and Sonia Renee. Totally blew me away. But she mentioned something that she was like, she's like, when you walk, how when you walk away from a conversation with someone and you just go, ugh, I feel yuck and gross. It's like the energy of their unresolved stuff. So it's like, you can feel people's energy. I mean, you can feel like, when you feel good, and it's like that part of themselves is like that balance between masculine and feminine, the yin and yang. It's not kind of those knots that kind of just kind of ooze out and fester and never heal, because they've never been kind of nurtured and helped to heal. And I had 2 more things to say. I know I'm talking a lot, but 2 more things to say. One is, do you work with kind of, youngish kind of teens and stuff as well?
Yeah, up until this year, the last 2 years, I was doing workshops in schools with teenage boys.
Oh, great. Okay. So I've had 3 young boys recently, sort of between the ages of 15 and 20 probably.
Yeah.
All gamers. Really, I find them interesting, but also I find it quite distressing. So when they're quite introverted, like they're introverts, they kind of say, well, COVID's been great because, I kind of get to be by myself and, I can cope with all the work and that hasn't been distressing. But, like they're introverts and they're shy, but when they're gaming, and I've kind of tried to help them go into like how they feel as a gamer versus how they are in the outside world, like there's this massive contrast. So when they're gaming, they're confident and their energy is really high and they can say whatever they want. And then when they go into real life, like one of them who's 20 literally has a triangle of where he goes. They're the only 3 places he goes. I'm like, he wouldn't say it like this and he doesn't really get this, but he's so scared of like the emotions coming up that he contains his interactions so he doesn't have to feel anything. He just gets to be the gamer and super confident.
Yeah.
And oh my God, like I did some work with him just recently and he cried and he totally freaked out that he was crying. It's like, I don't like crying. I don't want to cry. It's so looked down upon. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is what men and boys have to deal with. It's okay for a girl to cry.
Yeah.
We allow girls to cry. Boys crying, oh my God, it's so destructive the way it's squashed.
Yeah.
That's their feminine, right? That's them being okay with their feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is, people need to understand the repercussions of this, yeah? Because, suck it up, don't be a princess, only girls cry. The boy that hears that at 6 years old, or the boy that hears that at 4 until 25, that's the man at 35, 45, 55 who women are going, oh, he's so emotionally unavailable.
Absolutely.
Or the guy who only
is the provider only.
Yeah, he's a provider. He's a great engineer. He's a great great at his work, but he has no connection to himself. He has no connection to his heart. He has no connection to his feelings. He has no sense for the moment because he's been conditioned to cut off anything below the neck, including sexuality. Yeah. That's the man who becomes Donald Trump. Like I've heard. I've been hearing recently. I think a book come out from his.
Yeah, his niece. Yeah, that's quite fascinating.
Yeah, and I haven't read it. Probably won't, but I have heard just the summary of. Apparently, he was insanely traumatized. But I mean, that's only pretty obvious by the way the man carries himself.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, and this is not blame for any of those things. Like, it's not blame for, like, quote unquote emotionally unavailable men, or anything. It's just a recognition piece. Like, it doesn't stop. Yeah, like that conditioning doesn't evaporate once we hit 18 or 21 or 30. Like I said in my bit before, you live from fear until you realize you're living from fear and do something about it. Yeah. It's so fucked up when something which is a normal human process, crying, is a very beneficial thing, to be told don't do that, because it's not just don't cry, it's don't feel your emotions.
Yeah, don't release, don't show anyone, because that's considered a weakness. And with him particular, I don't actually know if it's like childhood or if it's kind of like being a teenager and maybe something happening as a teenager at school in front of peers, because it seems to be a real peer thing. So it could be either, but it is also possible that, you know, a boy's allowed, you know, given kind of the space to cry as a younger person, because I do feel like we're moving into the age of allowing this more.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of, you know, you think about boys at school, there's a lot of boys that, you know, are not quite caught up to that. And then they're the boys that obviously don't feel as great about themselves and want to hurt other boys and squash them to make them feel better. And it can happen in that space as well. And I think generally we're kind of moving more into, you know, understanding our emotions are all normal. You know, it's getting stuck in the same emotions that is the trauma or the not. You know, if you're noticing that, oh, that kind of reaction isn't kind of fit the event, it's like, why was that? That's just a knot. That's just a knot to undo.
Yeah.
And I think people get kind of old school thinking again, a little bit old school is, but maybe not actually, even if I think it's like, it's so scary for people to deal with what the stuff was that they were traumatized about. But, you know, when people come and see me, I'm like, none of this is going to surprise you because it's all your stuff.
Yeah.
It's just going to make sense.
I like that.
It's like, it's not like I'm going to pull something out and go, boom, there's a big bomb for you. It's like, it's your stuff.
Yeah.
You put it together. I'm just going to help you kind of make some sense of it so you can recognize what has been happening, and then, you know, we can kind of change that pattern. Then you can change how you want to react and how you want to go forward.
Yeah. And you nailed it. And coming to this bit about gaming, because the rise of gaming is insane. They get to be someone else.
That's what it is.
And they get to be, he gets to be a hero. Like you think about the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Like men especially, I've seen, we take to myth. Yeah, like we love mythology. We love story about heroes and wisdoms and dragons and kings and falling and rising. Like that is, if I've ever known anything to be in a man's DNA, that is in a man's DNA. Is how much myth and legend and heroics play a part in what is just propelling us in society. And that's what gaming gives boys the opportunity to do. They literally get to be an avatar of someone else. They get to create it. They get to live it.
Control it.
Exactly. And so, you know, then he comes back into normal reality of who the fuck he actually is. He's not that thing, yeah? And it is addiction. Like
totally.
It genuinely is addiction. It's no different to, you know, cocaine, alcohol.
I haven't thought about it like that before.
Yeah.
It's like the addiction part is they actually become someone else and feel like the experience of not being themselves.
Yeah.
Right. That makes such sense. I've always thought of it like I can get the dopamine, the neurotransmitter side of it, but I've never actually thought of it in terms of like the persona side of it.
Yeah. And so actually I want to bridge this into something else. Understanding that is a scary prospect, in my opinion, for when 3D gaming like is then a main thing. Yeah. Like when you can actually put on goggles and you are literally in a world. Even though you're in your, you know, your bedroom, your living room, your basement, whatever, because that's a scary prospect. I believe for boys and men in their individual experience of the world. But then, of course, who that means they be or can't be or function to be in society. Yeah. So
And that gets further and further away, basically.
100%. And so I fully believe that if our technology continues to advance faster than our consciousness does, we're in a really fucked position.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be like doom and gloom, but I think that's a reality check. Yeah, because right now, and I link this all back to the start, we are this hyper masculine society that is all about more, better, faster, stronger, profit. Yeah, like 5G, like faster technology, self-driving cars. You know, it means maybe one day you can sit in the back and do something else. But my question is, every time in this conversation, is why? Like, why do we need faster things? What are you going to do? Okay, now you've got faster internet. What are you going to do with it? Okay, now you've got a robot who cooks for you. Okay, now you've got a car that drives. Like, what are you going to do with that time? And I'm fucking sure as shit, sounds so Australian right there, that most people are going to fill that time with more doing.
Yeah, totally.
More activity. It's like, why?
That's what we prove every single time we get an advancement. We just do more.
Exactly. And like no one that I work with comes to me and goes, Kristian, I want a faster pace of living.
Yeah.
Like, Kristian, like I want to fill my life with more stuff.
Yeah.
Even when people come to me and say, I'm procrastinating, you know, I need to be.
Actually, this links back to all addiction as well. And us being a persona, you know, the more we do, the more we perceive ourselves in this way. The more we have, the more we perceive ourselves in this way. That all falls into that same sort of thing.
Yes. Yeah. I'll come to that. I'll finish this off.
Yeah.
Because that's true, right? So no one is coming to me saying, I want to be, you know, live a more rushed life. Everyone is coming to me and saying, Kristian, I want more fulfillment. I want to be able to connect better with my partner. I want to like access my sexuality. I want to have fun. I want to be more playful. I want to experience more calm. I don't want to be as anxious. And I can guarantee you technology is not the answer to that, because one of my favorite sayings, I got a lot of them up my sleeves, is everywhere you go, there you are.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it means you travel to Egypt, you take your mind with you, you take your past with you, you take your conditioning with you.
And your knots.
And your what?
And your knots.
And exactly, you take your knots. So everywhere you go, there you are. So technology is not going to solve problems that are only solvable by human consciousness, yeah? And so you think about, okay, well then why does all this stuff happen? You have to look at history and evolution to understand where it came from and how what got us here was helped, but now it hinders us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's no different to you break your leg, you need a crutch for 6 weeks, and that's a good thing. The crutch helps you to aid and mend. But once your leg is healed, if you continue to get around on crutches, you're less than fully functional, right? So we got here, we need a change now, in my opinion. And what you said about it being a persona and an addiction, I think is accurate, because we've entangled value and doing for self-worth and self-love.
Yeah.
So there's
the emotional side.
Yeah. So if I can just take a moment to break that down, self-worth, in my opinion, is how deserving you feel of love. Mm-hmm. But first of all, that's self-love. Yeah. Like how worthy am I of my own self-love? How much permission will I give for my own self-love? So that's worthiness to me. Value is what I can offer the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, in a real easy example, which I laugh often at, a 35, a 45, a 55-year-old adult has significantly more value to give to the world than does a 6-week-old infant baby.
True. Well, yes, maybe.
Yeah, bear with me. So the adult has gone through life. Ideally, the adult has learnt things, they've had challenges, they've overcome those things, they've got learnings, they've got wisdom, they can pass that on to other people. Yeah. Obviously, they also have their own shit. But as a 6-week-old infant doesn't have that. Obviously, they're insanely dependent upon everyone else. Everyone else's schedule now revolves around the infant. Yeah, like you have to tailor your entire life. Yes, they present like good feelings and stuff like that, but they also, yeah, like there's all that other, like you lose sleep. Yeah, like it does change, and everything revolves around that infant. Yet they have, in my opinion, equal worth. Yeah. The 6-week-old, 35, the 45-year-old adult, they are no more or less worthy of feeling love for themselves or feeling loved by others. And so where this has become a problem in my opinion a lot, haven't I? Is that worth and value get equated as the same thing. And so people think, well, to be worthy of my own love and to be lovable from someone else, I've got to be the best doer. I've got to be the best performer. And that comes through in different ways. Like that comes through for men often in providing. For women, you'd be able to tell me better. It can come through in, I've got to be a great wife or great partner, or I've got to be a great mum. Or, I do know women that I've worked with, they're concerned about their kids being great kids so that they look like a good mum. I don't want to be a bad mum, things like that. So that comes back to worth and value. And when the pitfall of this is it's due to like performance. Yeah. Like when we rank ourselves about how much we're doing and how well we're performing in our job or how well we're providing, we often do it based on other people as well. Yeah, like we look at other people and say, oh, that person is like performing so much better. How come they have a better job? How come they have a better car? How come their kids eat their greens? Their kids are so polite. Yeah. And so if we base our performance off of other people rather than listening to what's true to our values and our integrity, it's always the mark is always moving. It's always changing because I'm not approving of myself, basically.
Yeah. And on top of that is like if they fail at something, or if they have a car accident and can't be productive while they're healing, or if they sprain an ankle and can't get back on the field because that's how they value themselves, that's massive problems like waiting to happen because of the whole identity in that.
Yeah.
I liken what you said to often what I describe as the difference between self-confidence and self-esteem. So self-esteem is just like that inherent, what do you call it? What did you say? The valuing self or the worthiness. Yeah. It's like that inherent, I'm valuable in the world just because I'm breathing.
Yes.
Because I'm just here. I have a purpose. That's why I'm here. I may not know what the purpose is. I may not be able to do anything about it right at this moment because of whatever situation. But sometimes you need those things, those times just to be.
Yes.
As in confidence is like the first time you ever try and play tennis, you might not be very confident at it, but you'll still have good self-esteem.
Yes.
And the more you practice the tennis, the more confident you become, and you still have good self-esteem. So if then you lose a match, your confidence might drop, but your self-esteem is still healthy.
Yeah.
And that's the difference in terms of like parenting. I'm really conscious about not praising them all the time for what they do. I mean, they have good achievements and I praise them for sure. But I say, I love you for who you are. I love your heart. Yeah. I love your emotions. I love your brain. It's like I try and go to who they are.
Yes.
Rather than just what they do in the world. And for girls, like I have a stepdaughter who, she's beautiful on the outside, but she's always been told how beautiful she is on the outside. So she's always valued it very highly. But it was her birthday today, and I wrote a message on her Facebook saying, remember, you are much more than just a pretty face. Because who she is actually so much more beautiful than what she looks like. And she's only starting to see that.
Yes. Yeah. I that's touching for me, like acknowledging and giving love to someone's being, and the way that you're doing that with your children. When I did work with boys, so for 2 years before this year, I was working for the Man Cave, which is an organization down here, and we work with teenage boys in schools. And we worked from regional Victoria, where there was proper drug and violence stuff going on. Like we got to the school, and the school actually looked like a construction site. Like, some windows were broken in. It was a cold place. And then we would go to the most elite school. We went to Melbourne Grammar. We went to Trinity. We went to what other Scotch. Like literally, the most elite schools in Australia, and it was the same themes. Yeah, like each boy was dealing with the same thing. But just the contents of it were different. And sure, that in regional Victoria, there's definitely like some violence and stuff like that goes on, which doesn't go on in these affluent, super wealthy areas. But by large and part, I saw the same themes. And yes, one of them is boys and men only ever being recognized for what they can provide.
Their doings.
And we would have this section at the end of the day, which was, and the workshops were to teach emotional intelligence, basically. So it was actually just sharing. We would play games. We would find cool ways to get them to just, tiptoe into the ocean, and then take them a little bit further into sharing and opening up, basically for them to learn that, hey, you don't lose your cool guy card if you open up, And like, it's a phenomenal organization, and honestly, boys would give us feedback at the end of the day saying, this is the best thing I've ever done at school.
Wow, how amazing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're expanding into New South Wales. They're doing that. So, that's just there for you because you're in New South Wales. But we had a bit at the end, which was called an acknowledgement or an honouring. And we'd stand around in a circle, and each boy would take a moment, whoever wanted to would take a moment to walk into the middle and just turn to someone and acknowledge them for something that happened in the day. And, we give them some coaching around that, because often they walk in, oh, yeah, you're sick, man, cool and stuff. But, we walk them back, and it's like, hey, we just want you to, like, do this thing. And, they would acknowledge for each other, like, Tim, I thought it was awesome when you shared that thing about, your cat dying and you were sad, because actually my cat died and I've been sad, or my dog died and I've been sad too. and I didn't know I could talk about it. Like things as literal as that, which is like, you think about that. Boys aren't allowed to say that stuff. Oh, my cat died, my dog died, and I'm sad. You know, oh, it's an animal. Fucking just get a new one. You know, like yeah. Or they'd walk in and say, "Man, when you opened up about you know, your dad, you know, I just really related to that, and that gave me the ability to share as well." And this to me, you know, that's the moving forward, in my opinion. Like that's
the getting more in touch with the feminine and more in touch with the balance. It's the just reiterating that, because even though we've been on a lot of tangents through this conversation, it's actually the same stuff. It's like the feeling and the emotional and being more in touch with that heart emotional stuff is the key to the balance.
Yeah, totally. And I guess to pull this all together, it's just the ability to feel. Like the feminine is the ability to feel and sense, in my opinion. And you know, you talked to me, we haven't touched on dancing at all, but you said before we started recording you wanted to talk about dance, and I'm well aware that we're an hour and 10. But like dancing, for example, my intention is to meet my partner first. Yeah. So for everyone that's listening, I dance and teach a form of Latin partner dance called bachata, and I just describe it as salsa's sexier cousin. So everyone knows what salsa is. I dance salsa as well, but I teach bachata essential, and so I'm the lead. Yeah, like I'm indicating, okay, we're gonna go over here. Okay, now you're going to do this. Okay, now this is going to happen. So I'm the one who makes the invitation, and, you know, ideally my partner follows and we're dancing. So this reconnecting to the feminine or to the yin in us, especially as men, is our ability to meet ourselves, meet the moment, meet a woman, meet society where we're at, because otherwise we act robotically. We can do a turn pattern. Oh, I know the technique. I put my arm up, I turn like this, and yes, she does a circle. Yay, we're dancing. But like there's no embodiment.
But sometimes even those basic stuff doesn't happen either. I mean, I dance salsa and bachata as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you're dancing, it is exactly the same for me. It allows me to get more in touch with my feminine because I'm allowing you to lead me. So I go more into feeling. And if I'm not in feeling, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yes.
And if the guy is in robotics, there is no feeling.
Yeah.
It's like you have no feeling or direction. It's like, but for me as well, it allows as a woman to also be in my feminine, because it doesn't work if I'm not.
Exactly. Yeah. And to me, this is embodied leadership.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's how I view it. It's not leadership from the mind. And you mentioned Jacinda Ardern. I love her. Like honestly, she's the best representation of someone integrated in their feminine and masculine that I've ever seen in a world leader.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And, you know, hopefully that is the truth. But the way she's kind of has been able to navigate through some major crises, like I've found, you know, really refreshing. And on top of, like, just to finish off this conversation, like everyone should definitely go dance, definitely. But, you know, the whole what's happening in the world, like if people want to know more about this, they should go back to my podcast with Kelly Surtees, she's an astrologist, and she talks about like kind of the whole COVID thing in terms from an astrological perspective. But she also mentions like and this is fascinating, the way everything kind of plays in and influences things. So for the last 250 years, there's been a major cycle of, I don't know what planet, but whatever that planet is, it represents industry and building and structure. So I kind of said to her, well, kind of like the masculine. She's like, that's one way of putting it. but we're literally, I think it's from December, but she's like, it's going to take us a couple of years to get into the new flow of it, but we're moving into another planet for the next 250 years. So it's kind of like it's happening in our consciousness, I think, and things are definitely changing. And I feel like the kind of holding on, that kind of immature masculine holding on, using as much control of force as possible, is a kind of like that feeling of like it's about to collapse, so I'm going to hold it as long as possible, which can be a bit dangerous. But we're actually evolutionarily moving into that flow anyway.
Yeah.
So that's a really fascinating piece to put on top of all of this. I think, we can't kind of not move in this direction. We can't kind of not be more embodied in our feminine. We know how to do the masculine really, really, really well. We don't have to practice that. No. We have to practice like the bringing the feminine in and moving into that. And then, the world will be a different place. It's going to be quite interesting and exciting to be moving in that direction.
Yeah. I want to finish this by saying one really important part of this is when we don't give ourselves what we need, when we can't, we will seek it outside of ourselves. Mm. And so I'm really interested in the environment. I'm also largely overwhelmed by it. I think we are on a track to like really fucking up the planet if things don't change like we're talking about. And yeah, like for me, this is going to be one of the biggest shifts and again, that Mother Nature, right?
Mother Earth, yeah.
The feminine, yeah. Mm. We have to realize that we aren't bigger than her. Mm. We're not at the top of the food chain, because holy shit, if we think that, we literally will deplete the food chain.
And think about a mother.
Yeah.
How she behaves when she's threatened.
Yeah. Erratic as probably.
Yeah. Or she'll, throw up a big fire, like we've had like these major fires. It's like
totally.
It's like, you are not hearing me. I start with my kids, it's nice and gentle. Can you please do this, or get this ready? And then I go up and I go up and I go up.
Yes.
That's typical mother.
Totally. I love that. Yeah. It's like, this is the transition that we need. We don't need to usher in the next industrial revolution, the next technology revolution. We need to learn to slow down, come home to our bodies, deal with what we're afraid to face. Mm. And it's actually a mass global values shift.
Yeah, totally.
Because, hey, what's your... No, Annie's a chiropractor.
No, I'm the chiro.
Yeah, you're a chiro. Yeah.
Annie was the lawyer.
Lawyer.
Yeah.
John D. Martini's work?
Yeah.
So I really value his stuff on values, which shows that we prioritize time, energy, and money to the things that we value the most.
Yeah.
And it's really what it's going to take, in my opinion, is we actually have to shift our values from profit and performance and doing to being in and progression and like, this linear, like, can I do it better? Can I build more? We have to realize that we're part of a holistic ecosystem, and that's going to take people like us speaking about it, embodying it, and giving options for other people to get on board with this.
Mm. And even, getting in touch with that within us, but also I find it even easier to do that in nature. And maybe it's because of that energy. You're with Mother Earth. You're actually in that feeling space with nature.
Yeah.
Awesome. That was an awesome conversation. I feel like we could keep going and keep going and keep going. But
yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me. And can you just let people know where they can find you?
Yeah, cool. So 2 places I hang out the most, Facebook and Instagram. Yeah, no doubt they'll be able to see my name, I assume, when you share this thing. But yeah, just search me, Kristian Stephan Martin. Kristian with a K. Yeah, and if you listened to this episode, love to hear from you. Yeah, like genuinely slide up in my DMs. Let me know what was valuable, what you took from it. Yeah.
And what's your TED Talk?
And what?
Reconnecting to the inner feminine.
Yeah, I mean, you can go for that. No doubt people will search that. I've been thinking a lot lately. A lot of people have said to me, "Hey, I watched your TED Talk." And I was like, I learned very quickly. I would have done it differently. I would have cut my hair. I would have dressed better. I would have delivered it differently. But I wholeheartedly stand by the message.
But it was like, how many years ago? It was like 4 years ago. 3
yeah.
Close to 4 years ago. So, you were way ahead of your time. and you were 4 years younger.
Yeah.
So, yeah, awesome. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on, Kristian.
No worries.
Talk soon.
Bye.
If you loved or learnt something in this episode, share it. And don't forget to subscribe. I look forward to bringing you next week's Awakening Conversation. Have a wonderful week.